Belief and identity work are so powerful because when you upgrade your beliefs, you expand your reality. You start seeing new options, new outcomes, and new ways of responding that literally weren't available to you before. So many different self-limitations that I'd put on myself before that I decided through my thoughts to change. I decided that I was no longer limited by those things. I made those choices through the thoughts I was thinking and the beliefs I cultivated in myself, which enabled me to do things that maybe before I would have felt were too big or too scary or too hard. But I changed the way I was looking at these experiences, and I changed the things I was telling myself about my own capacity and my own capabilities, and that allowed me to do the things scared, to go out and possibly mess up and make a fool of myself, because I knew that failure is a part of growth. I was really able to adopt that growth mindset through this thought work, through this belief work on myself. And we all can do that. That's the thing that makes life so exciting. We get to always level ourselves up. And as we do, our world expands and we get more ignited, we get more passionate, we get more engaged with this game of life. Welcome to Parents and Teens Rising, the podcast that bridges the gap between parents and teens and helps families thrive. I'm Jasmine Chandler, teen and parent coach, wilderness rites of passage guide, and founder of Guided Passages. After over 16 years of working with young people, I know how challenging and rewarding these years can be. Each week, we'll explore real conversations, practical tools, and fresh perspectives to help you connect with your teen, support their confidence, and navigate the ups and downs. Let's rise together. Hey everyone, welcome back into the podcast. We're officially in week 2 of my 4-episode miniseries, The Up-Level Reset, 4 Simple Shifts for a Stronger 2026. This was created to help you get your new year off to an amazing start. So over the last 4 Wednesdays of 2025, I am bringing you one powerful reset each week to help you let go of what is no longer serving you and step into 2026 with more confidence, inspiration, and clarity. Last week, we kicked things off with week 1, the focus shift, because where you place your attention shapes your emotional world, your relationships, and the story you live inside. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I really recommend you pause here and go start there first. This series is really designed to build week by week, and that first reset sets the foundation for everything we're doing next. One thing I keep coming back to is this: the most powerful thing we can do for our kids isn't always another strategy for them. It's the work we do within ourselves, because the way we show up emotionally, the way we make meaning of what's happening, and the way we steady ourselves in hard moments quietly sets the tone for our whole home. So a lot of parenting breakthroughs aren't actually about parenting techniques. They're really about capacity. When we strengthen our inner world, we increase our ability to lead with clarity, connection, and calm. And that naturally reshapes the emotional culture in our households. And I don't know about you, but last week's focus shift really helped me to recalibrate and shift the way I'm viewing my world, my challenges, my family members, and what's possible for me in this coming year. I've been listening to guided meditations and affirmations for many years now, but it's always been sort of sporadic. So actually committing to this practice of starting my day with a quick meditation has been so huge for me. It's really amazing what a difference it makes for the way I'm able to show up and for the way I'm able to perceive my reality through a different lens. I hope you've been noticing a lot of powerful benefits too. And I'm just wondering if you had a chance to check out my YouTube playlist that I shared last week. It's got a few of my favorite guided meditations and affirmations in there, and I even added in one of my own too. So that's a great place to start if you haven't hopped onto the challenge yet of committing to 5 minutes of guided meditation affirmation practice every morning. All right, that brings me to week 2 of this series. So last week we focused on where we place our attention, and this week we're going to go a level deeper. Because once you shift what you notice, the next big reset is shifting what you believe about yourself, your life, your teen, and what's actually possible for you in 2026. So today we're talking about the power of our thoughts and our beliefs, and how our belief system shapes your entire life experience, your confidence, your motivation, your emotional reality, and the goals you even allow yourself to want. All right, so the first piece I want to talk about today is that our beliefs are like an invisible blueprint, right? So they are some of the most powerful forces shaping your life. And most of the time, you're not even conscious of them. Beliefs act like filters. They determine what you notice, what you assume is possible, what you interpret as proof, and what you decide you're capable of. That means two people can live in the same house, face the same stressors, or parent the same teen and have completely different emotional experiences based on the story they're carrying. And the deeper layer here that's important to name is that our perception of reality is not a full picture of reality. It's a construct shaped by what we've been taught, what we've lived through, what we've survived, and the beliefs we've carried forward from those experiences. And what this means is we're often only seeing a limited slice of what's actually possible for us and for our kids and for our future. Not because we're doing something wrong, but because our brain is always organizing our world through the lens it has learned to trust. This is why belief and identity work are so powerful, because when you upgrade your beliefs, you expand your reality. You start seeing new options, new outcomes, and new ways of responding that literally weren't available to you before. Not because they didn't exist, but because your mind wasn't trained to notice them yet. So think about how many things you probably wouldn't even attempt if you fully believed they were out of reach. When someone shifts from that kind of life isn't for people like me to what if it is? What if I'm allowed to receive that? Their whole decision-making system changes. They start saying yes to opportunities they would have dismissed. They ask different questions. They meet different people. They notice doors that were always there but were invisible to them before. Not because the universe suddenly became more generous overnight, but because their belief expanded the range of actions they were willing to take. I like to think of beliefs like setting the dial on a radio. If you're tuned into the thought that life is mostly struggle and I'm on my own, you're going to interpret everything through that frequency. But if you shift towards I'm supported, I'm guided, and I'm not doing this alone, you'll start noticing help, timing, connection, and opportunity in places you might have missed. So no matter how you interpret that, the lived experience is real, and it softens your nervous system, increases your courage, and it helps you become more receptive to what's actually possible. Most of us walk around with a very narrow window of perception. What we see and notice are our own stressors, our own homes, our own day, our own problems. But there's a much bigger web of life happening all the time. People, networks, timing, ideas, resources, relationships, constantly shifting and intersecting. We can think of our beliefs as a kind of lens, not just for how we interpret our lives, but for what we even believe is possible in the first place. Our perception is limited by what we've been taught and what we've lived through. So when we expand the belief from I'm stuck to I'm supported, or from I can't to I'm doing this, we often start noticing possibilities that were always there. You can call that neuroscience or mindset or faith, or the way life works when you show up with openness. But no matter how you label it, the results are the same. Your world gets bigger, your options expand, and the doors you couldn't see before start to look a lot more real. All right, so the second thing I want to talk about and highlight here is how we can identify and shift all of those limiting beliefs. So a lot of the thoughts that limit us sound like truth, but they're not. They might be things like, I'm not consistent. I always mess up. I'm too old to start. I'm not good at boundaries. My teen will never change. I don't have what it takes. There's too much on my plate. Everything is always hard for me. And no matter how true those things feel in any given moment, they are not facts. They are not the whole truth. They're learned conclusions based on past moments, past versions of ourselves, and past experiences. And if we keep treating them like truth and repeating them over and over in our minds, we'll keep living inside a life that matches them, right? So it's like we're creating this experience for ourselves with the thoughts that we're thinking and the beliefs that we create, right? We kind of put ourselves in this box in life. And we can become trapped by our own self-limiting beliefs. So we don't want to let these beliefs run the show. We want to be able to start to bring conscious awareness to what is happening inside of our mind, what's happening in our thought processes, what we're repeating to ourselves, the neural pathways that we're strengthening in our lives that either limit what we think is possible or expand what we think is possible. So much of that is created by the thoughts that we think and the beliefs that we hold. And so what that means is that we have a lot more power than we have given ourselves credit for in our lives. We get to choose those thoughts. We get to choose those beliefs. We get to build those pathways through repetition, right? That's why I gave you that challenge of affirmations and guided meditation, because the more we are repeating these positive things, these shifts in perspective, the affirmations about our capabilities and our strengths and all of those things, the more we're able to create a different experience for ourselves. This work has been so profound in my life. It has enabled me to, create an entire new career path for myself, to step through uncomfortability, discomfort, fear, so many different things, so many different self-limitations that I'd put on myself before that I decided through my thoughts to change. I decided that I was no longer limited by those things. I made those choices through the thoughts I was thinking and the beliefs I cultivated in myself, which enabled me to do things like go teach in front of 100 people, or, go live on Facebook or Instagram, or do all kinds of things like take kids out into the backcountry that maybe before I would have felt were too big or too scary or too hard. But I changed the way I was looking at these experiences. And I changed the things I was telling myself about my own capacity and my own capabilities. And that allowed me to do the things scared, to go out and possibly mess up and make a fool of myself, because I knew that failure is a part of growth, right? I was really able to adopt that growth mindset through this thought work, through this belief work on myself. And we all can do that, right? And it's a never ending process. It's not like we arrive at the finish line or something like that. There's always more growth. There's always the next layer. And that's the thing that makes life so exciting, right? We get to always level ourselves up. And as we do, our world expands and we get more ignited. We get more passionate. We get more engaged with this game of life, right? And so we want to always be kind of pushing ourselves to that next level because we prove to ourselves over time that we can, right? Every level that we progress upon, we get to tell ourselves and show ourselves and prove to ourselves that, like, hey, look what I just did. If I could do that, I can do this, right? So we build our capacity, and it starts with those thoughts and those beliefs of just telling ourselves that, shoot, I don't know how to do this right now, but I can figure it out, right? I've done hard things before, so I can do this too, right? So these are the things that we can start feeding ourselves, which are going to completely shift our experience for the better. All right, so here's a powerful way to bring these beliefs into the light. So anytime you feel stuck or overwhelmed or avoidant or hopeless, there's often a belief underneath it. So instead of asking, what's wrong with me? You can ask, what am I believing right now that is making this feel impossible? That question alone can reset your entire nervous system and bring you back into choice. And in my opinion, this is where a lot of mindset work goes wrong. People try to jump straight from a painful belief into a statement that their brain and nervous system don't believe yet. So instead of forcing a huge leap, what I want you to do instead is to create a bridge thought or a bridge belief. So for example, your old belief might be, I can't handle hard conversations. A bridge belief could be, I'm learning how to stay steady in hard conversations. So it's not that like I'm perfect at hard conversations now, or I'm great at hard conversations, or it's my favorite thing to have hard conversations. It's just that I'm learning how to stay steady in hard conversations. That's believable, right? I'm learning this. An old belief might be, I'm not motivated. A bridge belief could be, I'm building momentum one small step at a time. Right? An old belief might be, my teen will never change. A bridge belief might be, my teen is still developing and growing every day, right? So we want to remind ourselves that there are other possibilities, right? And it doesn't have to be a huge jump Just a little shift, a little reframe can change so much in the way that we're perceiving something, which in turn will impact the way that we relate to that thing and the way that that thing makes us feel. So bridge beliefs feel grounded and believable and powerful, which means your brain can actually start building new pathways around them. All right, the third thing I want to talk about today is thought work. And I think of this as the gateway to real change. So throughout time, so many teachers have pointed us toward the same truth. The quality of our lives is deeply shaped by the quality of our thoughts. Some of the most influential teachers for me have been Byron Katie, Brooke Castillo of the Life Coach School, and Martha Beck. But there have been so many teachers throughout time that have pointed to thought work as foundational and transformational. And all of them point to the same truth. When you learn to notice your thoughts and understand their impact and choose again, you can change your life from the inside out. And just to tie this into what we were just talking about with beliefs, like what's the difference between thoughts and beliefs? The way I think about it is when I think a thought enough times and create a very, very strong neural pathway around that thought in my brain, that has then become a belief. That's a belief about myself, a belief about the world, a belief about my life, right? A belief about someone else in my life. Okay. So the more we think a thought, the more ingrained it becomes and the more it turns into that belief, right? That really informs so much. All of this thought work also is really in line with something that's called the TEB cycle that comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. And so this is the idea that, every thought that we think drives the emotions that we feel, and the emotions that we feel then drive the behaviors and actions that we take, right? And so often that will create a loop. So your thoughts influence how you feel, how you show up, and what results you create, which means if we're really intentional about the thoughts we're thinking, we can actually shift our emotional state and the actions we take or don't take in our life, right? So engaging in thought work isn't just about feeling better in a hard moment, although that really is helpful also, but it's one of the most powerful ways to intentionally reshape your belief system and expand what's possible for you in your new year and beyond. One really good place to start with this work comes from this quote that I love from Byron Katie, where she says, "If a thought hurts you, question it." Right? That single line really captures the heart of thought work, right? If a thought hurts you, question it. We don't have to just keep playing the same thought over if it's creating negative results in our life, negative emotions, negative behaviors, negative outcomes, right? We get to question it. We get to potentially reframe it, right? And one of the ways that I have done this work in my own life and really been able to shift a lot of my harmful thoughts has been to apply the work of Byron Katie. So Byron Katie has developed a really simple, powerful process of self-inquiry that she calls the work. And this practice can be found in her book that's titled Loving What Is. And I highly recommend it. It's a very excellent book. It gives lots and lots of examples of how we can apply this. And it's centered on 4 questions that you can ask yourself about any stressful thought that is not making you feel good in your life. So when you notice a painful thought, especially one that feels really heavy or absolute or that's spinning on a loop, you can slow yourself down and ask these 4 questions. All right, so the first question is it true? And here we want to work on not answering from fear, but just checking in honestly with ourselves. Is it true? Is it a fact, right? And then the second question she asks is, can you absolutely know that it's true? So for the first question, you were like, yeah, it's true, or I think so. Then you move into that second question that is, can you absolutely know it's true? Like, do you have hard evidence? Like you could prove this factually, right? And here with this one, it really just creates more space, and it just allows us to like kind of recognize like, oh yeah, like this is not black and white. There's nuance here. There's other ways that I could look at this, right? And then question 3 is, how do you react when you believe that thought? So what happens in your body, your tone, your actions? How do you treat yourself or your teen or your partner while you're holding that belief? And then number 4, who would you be without the thought? Right? So this is a really liberating question because Not what would you do to fix everything, but who are you when this thought isn't driving the car, right? What would change for you if this was no longer part of your belief system, right? So these are such powerful questions, and you can really reframe anything. I mean, it's amazing the things that she addresses in her book, the topics that she doesn't shy away from, and she helps people to reframe, which lead to so much healing, because there's always another way to look at situations. And when we do that work, it creates a different perception of the reality that's happening, a different way of looking at the situation, which opens up new ways of thinking about it, new solutions for it, new ways to think about ourselves and our relationship to that problem, right? All right, and the final step in Byron Katie's process is called the turnaround. So after you've asked yourself the 4 questions, you explore what it would look like to turn that thought around. And this is a way of really gently testing the opposite out, a more self-directed version, or maybe even a more compassionate reframe. And so you can do the opposite of the thought, or you could kind of turn it on yourself, like maybe it's true about you, just as it is about the other person. There's lots of different ways that you can do the turnaround, but basically it's finding another version of that thought that feels true to you and that helps you to shift your perspective around whatever's happening and kind of shift your emotional state around it too. All right, so here's an example of how we can apply this as parents. So maybe the thought is, my teen never listens to me. We go to question 1. Is it true? Well, yeah, it's true. He never listens to me. Then we go to question 2. Can I absolutely know it's true? Like, is this the truth every single time, every single moment, all through this kid's entire life that he has never listened to me? Is that really absolutely true? Right? And once I get down to that, I'm like, well, actually, there have been lots of times that he has listened to me, right? Or she has listened to me. And then I move into question 3. How do I react when I believe that thought? So maybe I tighten up, I lecture, I feel defeated, I go into control mode. Who would I be without that thought? Well, I'd be more curious. I'd be calmer. I'd be more strategic. I would take things less personally, right? And then I can work on turning that thought around. And so now instead of my teen never listens to me, maybe it's my teen sometimes listens to me. Or I don't listen to my teen sometimes. Or I'm not listening to myself right now. Right? So there's so many different powerful reframes that we can make that just change the energy around a thought, right? And help us to view it through a different lens, which can change so much. All right, so the 4th thing I want to share with you today is how we can purposefully create the beliefs that are going to change our lives, right? So when we're thinking about this reset and how we want to head into 2026, this is a really powerful moment to do an honest audit of the thoughts and beliefs that have been keeping us stuck, the ones that quietly reinforce old patterns, drain our energy, and limit what we think is possible. Because whether we realize it or not, we're always living from a belief system. The question is whether it's one we built intentionally or one we absorbed through stress or survival or conditioning or past experiences. So a simple way to identify the beliefs that aren't serving you is to start where the emotional friction is. So Martha Beck reminds us, again, one of my favorite coaches and thought leaders, she reminds us that suffering is information. It's an ally that can point us toward what needs care or truth or change. She says we can ask ourselves whether something leads to more suffering or more joy, and then let that guide our next step, right? Is this thought or belief leading to more suffering internally, out in my life, out in the world, or is it leading me to more joy, right? And if it's leading me to more suffering, then I can look at that, right? I can maybe do some work around that thought because I don't want to be suffering. None of us do, right? And I love this line of thinking because suffering doesn't always need to be fixed or bypassed. Sometimes it needs to be felt and honored and understood. But it is a powerful doorway to clarity, right? It can really help to show us where there's, some disharmony inside, right? Show us a spot or a place that we can start if we want to create some change. Because overwhelm and stress and anger and resentment and frustration and even that low level heaviness that won't lift, those are often signals that a story is running in the background. It's a belief about yourself, a belief about what your life requires. It's a belief about what you're allowed to want, a belief about what's possible for your teen, or maybe even a belief about what you can realistically handle. So here's the reset question I want you to sit with. What's one place where suffering is present in your life? And what belief might be underneath that? Right? And then the next level question is, what belief would I need to practice instead for this part of my life to feel lighter, clearer, and more aligned in 2026? Because this is what changes everything. When you stop waiting for life to change first and you start choosing the inner framework that will guide your next steps. All right, the final thing I want to share with you today is another way that we can start shifting our thoughts and beliefs. All right. And this is something that I learned from Brene Brown. I can't remember which book I first heard her say this in, but the concept has stuck with me ever since. So when she notices internal friction or suffering, she'll take the thought that's running in her mind and simply add this opening line. The story I'm telling myself is. And I love this so much because it immediately creates space. It shakes us out of the illusion that our thought is an absolute fact. It reminds us that what we're experiencing isn't always a black and white reality. It's often a meaning we've created in our mind based on our past experiences, our past fears, our expectations, or just old patterns. Because the truth is that our thoughts are not facts. They are just sentences in our mind that we've created to make meaning of our circumstances. And that's such an empowering thing to remember, because if I created the meaning, that means I have the power to question it, to hold it more gently, and to choose another meaning if I want. So when I'm feeling overwhelmed or frustrated or stuck, I can pause and say, the story I'm telling myself is. And then I can check. Is this the only story available? Is this the most helpful story? Is this the story I want to carry into 2026? All right. And this question right here is actually what led me to this whole reset idea, because I realized, when I was writing in my journal that night, and I shared this a little bit in the last episode, when I was writing in my journal, that I was holding on to these old stories, right? That they had kind of resurfaced and I had grabbed hold of them again because they're still in there, right? They're still part of my pathway system. And if I'm not paying attention, I can fall back into those old stories pretty easily. And so I have to always be conscious and notice that. And so when I was reflecting, I realized that I was back in some old stories that just don't serve me anymore, that I grew tired of years and years ago, that I know are not true. I know they make me feel like crap. I know I don't want them in my life. I know they don't propel me forward. I know they make me feel bad about myself. And yet they're comfortable, right? They're familiar. They almost feel safe, even though they're really the opposite of safe, because they keep me from the things that bring me joy and purpose and contentment in my life. So that really inspired this whole process of this reset. And so again, I'm doing this work right here with you, right? These are all human experiences. This is not something that we just figure out and all of a sudden we're enlightened or something like that. This is ongoing, right? I might figure this out one day, or maybe for 1 week, or I might even have a really good month, right? But this is stuff I have to keep doing over and over and over again, because things resurface, new challenges arise, old patterns come back. And so I can keep asking myself these questions. What is the story I am telling myself about this right now? Is that story true? How does that story make me feel? Who would I be if I could let that story go? Right? What do I want instead? So these are just powerful reframes and self-check-ins that we can do that can change so much about our experience and how we feel in any given moment. Because we get to write our own stories. And when we change the story, we change how we feel, how we show up, and what becomes possible next. And I think that's so cool. I think that is so cool, Everything we need to thrive, it's here for us. We just have to grab hold of it, right? And we just have to do this life consciously. We can't just go to sleep at the wheel. We can't just let our brain do autopilot. We know when autopilot happens, we go right back into negativity bias. We go right back into old habits that don't serve us. We go right back into old beliefs that are keeping us stuck. And so we have to be conscious. We have to keep doing the work, like Byron Katie says. All right, so I want to leave you with some journal prompts again so that you can do some more reflection with this. So this is really more of an experience. This is an interactive experience. This isn't just a podcast you listen to and you turn off and you forget about, but hopefully because you're committing to this reset process over this last month of the year, you're spending some time after this episode to pull out your journal and actually reflect and apply this stuff to your own life. And so here are your journal questions for today. Where in my life am I possibly seeing a limited slice of reality right now? What might be another expanded, more supportive possibility I haven't fully considered yet? Number 2, when I feel stuck, overwhelmed, or discouraged, what is the thought underneath it? What am I believing right now that is making this feel impossible? Number 3, choose one stressful thought and walk it through. Is it true? Can I absolutely know it's true? How do I react when I believe it? How would I be without it? And then write one turnaround that feels most honest and that resonates with you. All right, and number 4, what's a story I've been living inside lately about myself, my teen, my relationships, or the future? What might be a kinder, truer, or more empowering story I want to bring into 2026? All of those questions are going to be in the show notes, so you can grab those afterwards and copy and paste them into your document or whatever you want to do. All right, so let's go ahead and move into our recap of what we talked about. Today, we continued the up-level reset with week 2, which was all about upgrading your beliefs. Because once you start shifting where you place your attention, the next big transformation is shifting what you believe about yourself, your life, your teen, and what's actually possible for you. We talked about beliefs as the invisible blueprint that filters your reality and shapes what you notice, expect, and pursue. How your perception of reality is often a construct shaped by what you've been taught and what you've lived through, which means there may be far more possibility available than your current lens can see. We talked about limiting beliefs that sound like truth, but are often learned conclusions, and how to name them with the question, what am I believing right now that is making this feel impossible? We also talked about bridge beliefs, which are the most sustainable way to upgrade your mindset without forcing your brain into a leap that it isn't ready to make. We talked about the power of thought work and the TEB cycle, how thoughts create emotions, emotions shape behaviors, and behaviors shape results. And then we talked about Byron Katie's inquiry process, the 4 questions and the turnaround as a practical way to soften certainty and expand your choices. And then finally, we talked about Brené Brown's reframe of the story I'm telling myself is, as a powerful reminder that our thoughts are not facts, they're meaning we've made, which means we can choose again. And this is all identity and belief work at its core. When you change the story, you change what becomes possible next. All right, so if today's episode helped you notice a belief you've been carrying on autopilot or gave you language to separate a thought from a fact, I want you to keep going with me through the rest of the series because this reset is designed to build. So take a few minutes with the journal prompts in the show notes. Pick one belief you're ready to loosen your grip on. Practice one bridge belief that feels doable and remind yourself you are not stuck with the story you've been carrying. You get to write your own story, and you get to choose what you're bringing with you into 2026. All right, friends, thank you so much for being here. I will see you next time. Bye, everyone. Did you enjoy the show? If so, would you take 30 seconds to subscribe so you don't miss an episode? Leave a quick review so more parents can find these conversations, and maybe even share this episode to your stories. And if you want to connect, please send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at jasmine.guidedpassages, and that's Jasmine with a Y. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll talk to you next week.